This is stage 2 of the Skoda Women's Tour on RGT. This one is kind of the queen stage, I guess, if you can call something a queen stage in a 3-stage race. This one has got I would call it a big climb, I guess. I don't know. It's probably, we'll see, 3 to 5 minutes. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a 5-minute climb at the most. But we're hitting that climb 3 times. And there's a little lead in here. I guess I should start showing like a course map at the beginning. As usual, especially in these sort of mixed field races, I want to get out to a little bit of an early lead because things are probably going to start sorting out pretty early. I don't necessarily want to take a flyer from the beginning, but I want to get out ahead of any potential problems that are going to happen. You can already see kind of an elite group forming here. So we have this like lead in and then 3 laps of a circuit. It's hard to tell what exactly is the lead in and where exactly the circuit starts, but I was really keeping my eye on everything up there in the top right corner that is going to let you know what profile is coming up, and really just watching for the climb to happen. I'm also watching for these little downhills. I got completely taken to task a couple days before this race on an RGT race with a downhill. Just was not quite on the wheel, and I think that being a smaller rider with less raw watts but pretty good watts per kilo, the same way that I can make a gap going up like I am right now. I'm not even really trying to go to the front. I was just trying to keep a good tempo and went to the front. The same way I can make some time and make a gap going up. If I get caught out on a downhill, I really pay for that, because if someone ahead of me is doing 500 watts, I probably have to do that or more to catch up to them, especially if it's a group up the road. So situations where we're going down anything more than maybe like 2%, I just have to be really cognizant to stay on the wheel, because it's really easy for me to get dropped, maybe even more so on RGT than other platforms. I think I mentioned it in one of my other videos, but having a big climb that you sort of know is going to be the leg breaker of the day, it can kind of neutralize the rest of the race. So I wasn't really expecting fireworks before that first climb. I'll say it's a little more action-packed than what I had imagined it might be, but it does kind of blunt the racing other than those big climbs, because everyone is sort of waiting to make their move on that one spot. So I'm trying to save as much as I can early on here while also not getting caught out, which is easier said than done. One thing I've found on RGT, maybe more than Zwift, it's a little easier to get taken off the back. So if you're on someone's wheel and you're really locked into their draft and they start to lose the wheel in front, it's really hard to pull that gap back, and you don't sort of naturally drift forward necessarily as quickly. I wouldn't even really call it the sticky draft. It's something that happens in real life too. It's a technique in real life, and I mentioned it in one of my other videos, but especially in a group of this size, it's really easy for that to happen. And this guy, Cadiz, I don't know how to say his name. I feel like I don't have the right accent, but he's putting in some early digs, and interesting one there, almost 6 watts a kilo, and then just dropping straight back. But he was an early animator today for sure, and here he goes. I think that actually might have been an intentional move by him to drop back and see if he could get a little head of steam going to sort of attack through the group, and that is a good technique. I use that a lot in stage 3 of this race, but you really got to pick your moment on that one. And I don't think this sort of like downhill false flat drag is really the best place for that. So I am taking note here that if you look in the top right, we're coming up to a little descent that's significantly steeper than what we have been on So I really just want to make sure that I'm on as we go over that knuckle. And as long as I'm on right there, I can get a really good rest. But if I'm off the back and it looks like I'm sort of being taken off a little bit, it's interesting how RGT forms those echelons a little bit more like real life. And I think that's when everyone is sort of afraid of being caught out. But yeah, I kind of take the front here right before it dips down to make sure I don't get caught out. And I think that was a good move. I'm going to stand behind that one because we get really, really ripping fast here. And I think if I had not been on this group, in this group, at this point, yeah, you can see that guy just flying by, but when he hits the wind, he kind of comes back to us. If I'd been off the back of this, this could have been a crazy, crazy hard effort, and this group would have really rolled away from us. I think we hit almost 50, maybe over 50 miles an hour at some point on that descent, and if you're by yourself and you're not pedaling really hard, especially if you're as light of a rider as I am, I don't know how the physics work on RGT exactly, but it seems like as a lighter rider, I don't go down quite as fast, which would make sense. I mean, that's true to sort of real life physics. And it does look like maybe a couple of guys got tailed off on that downhill. And we're not exactly pushing the pace. Yep, looking back, see whoever's back there is really, really having to work. And I would be kind of surprised if he got back on. It's going to be a big effort if he does. He's doing almost 5 watts a kilo right now, and I'm just hanging out at 3, 4. This is that echelon I was talking about. I think that happens when everyone is doing almost the same power, and it kind of fans out like that. The same power would be fanned completely across the road, but it's like no one wants to really let up, but everyone's trying to save a little something. I think that sort of echelon pattern forms, which is interesting on a road this wide. It kind of keeps the door open because on RGT you can't necessarily just phase through people. I think I'm understanding a little bit more about how, because you will see people sort of phase through from time to time, but you'll also see like the guy to the left of me in the red who just made a move into the back of Cadiz. He sort of stood up and accelerated into the back of him and got stopped. I think that happens. I think it's based on speed more than on watts per kilo in RGT. So I think you have to have a certain amount of speed differential before you really start touching the person in front of you or coming close to them for RGT to let you by. And the other way to get by, if you're right in someone's draft, is it kind of tells you what sort of power you need to get out and go around on the top left there. When you're behind somebody, it'll give you a little range, and that's sort of like what it takes to drift back and what it takes to go around. So when that echelon pattern forms, it's interesting because no one's saving a ton of watts, but I think everyone could attack and maybe get some immediate separation. I think the other way to do it would be like the position I'm in now. If I really, really got a head of steam going and just rolled past the group, it'll even, I think, let you roll through the group as long as I got a good speed differential going before I was a certain distance from those guys. And I think the distinction I want to make here is, it seems like to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but this is I'm a pretty analytical guy, so I'm always trying to figure out what's going on here. I think like on Zwift, it's sort of trying to tether you to someone based on the relative effort you are doing to them. And on RGT, it seems like it tries to tether you to someone more based on your relative speed. And I also think that's why, I'm learning how to save energy, and this comes into play later in this race, but I do a thing where I'll kind of, as someone attacks, I kick my power up and I don't get right on immediately, and then I roll through to the front, and then when I back off too far. And I think that's because the speed differential I'm creating, it's not latching me onto that person's draft. Speaking of drafting, doing a great job right now of Cadiz is pulling and we're kind of lining up single file. So this is a good example of sort of the opposite of that echelon, where everyone really is like one person is doing a lot of work, and then the effort level sort of goes down as you go back. I want to make sure I keep this on a pretty short leash, but I'm also trying to use the group dynamic to soften these surges a little bit. So I'm trying to make these guys behind me come around and slot into those empty bike links, because it seems like they're going pretty steady up at the front. So, you know, if somebody was going full stick, I might want to jump across that. But Cadiz is really just laying down a solid 6.2 watts per kilo, which, you know, kudos to him. That's a huge effort, but it is not quite enough to break all of us as long as we are in that draft, especially on a 2% false flat downhill. Although we did tail off a couple of guys right here, one of whom is definitely coming back. Spoiler alert right here. So take note of this guy, Belgian guy, Paraday. I'm not totally sure. Again, we got people from all over the world, so pretty awesome. But I'm not totally sure how to pronounce everyone's name, so sorry if I'm getting your names wrong. But Paraday, all white kit, just to the left of me right now. Take note of him. He was able to get tailed off and then get back on very easily right there, so definitely something to note. Again, we got a really steep descent right here, so this is another spot where I just need to be vigilant to be in the group. But yeah, I'm freewheeling here because I recognize how steep that descent is, and I did a really good job there of getting back on the power once it started to flatten out, but getting a few seconds of rest. That's something that, just as I learned the mechanics of the game, I'm going to get better at figuring out where I can save a little bit and where I need to spend a few watts. Interesting to watch Paraday just kind of drop back there. I think what he's doing is setting up an attack, maybe. We'll see. Yeah, he's coming around. Interesting. I don't know what he's doing with those surges, if he's just trying to find a spot in the group. I'm trying to save as much as I can because we are starting to come into the base of this next climb. So it starts pretty mellow and then ramps up after we round that corner right there. So we're already on almost 4%. So if you're not putting power down, you can definitely get dropped here. And I'm starting from a little farther back than I would have liked, but it can be hard to manage those corners. Sometimes you swing wide. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with speed differential. So if someone else is coming around the corner with a different speed than you, your avatar will not latch onto them, and it'll latch onto a different person. When I say latch on, I mean like get behind and try to draft. And this is a spot where I probably should have snapped a little harder to get up to those guys, because what I ended up doing here is living in this kind of no man's land on that flattest section before the next ramp, and wasted a little match there. That could have just been a steady like 275 watts that whole time, I think. I am trying to smooth this stuff out as much as possible and not panic. But we're about to hit the steep ramp, and we're on 4% right now, so this is not nothing, but it only gets steeper from here. This is sort of, you can see it rising up. It looks like an overpass ramp or something. So I'll talk a little bit about why it looks like that. So this is Magic Road, which means that RGT, and in my mind, this is kind of the killer function of RGT outside of the cornering and the slightly more robust drafting. RGT, you can plug in a GPX route, which a GPX file is just that's what like Strava creates to map your rides. It's elevation data, it's GPS positions, and it creates this road based on that. And so the gradient of the road, the turns, all of that are pulled from the real life file. And what it means is you can easily recreate courses, whatever courses. So for this race, this is a 3-stage race, the virtual version of the Women's Tour of Britain. And what's really cool about it is that these are virtual recreations of the actual roads that this race would have been on. So that's why it has this kind of overpass ramp look, because that's just what a virtually rendered climb looks like. So it really is just rendering the road itself based on the file that is on Strava or Map My Ride or wherever you pull that file from, and then it's sort of randomly generating the scenery on the side, so just like a little bit of dirt, the railing, and that kind of stuff, these trees you see up there. I've been hearing rumors about some sort of Magic Roads 2.0 being released soon, and I'm not totally sure what that'll entail, but my guess would be that the distance, scenery, and the sort of drop off on either side, I think it'll probably render more of that, or more detail, or some sort of different system for that, I would think would be part of Magic Roads 2.0. A big thing, I'm killing myself to get back to talking about the race itself right now. I'm killing myself to get back on. There's a couple of these little kicks, and then it flattens out, and I really want to be up there with those two when it flattens out, because it's clear that that is the race up ahead of me. So just I absolutely flogged myself on that little ramp, and my hope is if I can make it to this knuckle first, I'll be okay. This climb is not over yet, though. There's, I want to say, one more little ramp. It kind of undulates. This is also not like a straight up and straight back down thing. So I really need to get back on here because it's about to start rolling, and I really want to be with these two guys. But yeah, so I think one huge thing that has just happened with the Magic Roads feature is it used to be, up to this point, you would have to do a group ride on a Magic Road. And I'm getting tailed off right now. I thought I could let up, and if you look, Paraday's doing 6.6 watts a kilo, just holding it steady. Him and Melville are up there trading pulls, and they're together, going a lot faster than I can. So this is kind of a do or die moment. Surely the race is completely shattered behind me. In the pro version of this race, the women's pro race that happened, so they ran a women's pro race every day, and then they would do community races after that. There's like 3 different times for different time zones, and on this day I was able to do the time zone that had kind of the most talent. There was a group of guys who were doing this time zone and actually keeping up with the GC, and they had a spreadsheet going, so I think this is where most of the firepower was. But in the women's race, things really blew apart on that climb we just came over. A little group came together on the descent, but I don't think that we have the depth of field. I think they had almost 100 riders in that race, so like 10 of them came together on this downhill. So I think 3 of us is probably proportionally about the same. I think we had about 30 riders on the start line. That's another reason I did this race too. It seemed like something that a lot of people in the RGT community were excited about. So this is a moment I was totally unprepared for. The gradient kicks back up here, and then Paraday puts down a huge attack. I just totally didn't see it coming. This gets down to course knowledge, and this is also the kind of thing that happens on a real course with some little bumps and some little undulations that, it's completely killing me right now. Those guys are gone. Just really, really, really well-timed attack from Paraday. I don't know how he saw that coming, but that was perfectly timed. He came into that little ramp with a little head of steam, and then put down just a few seconds of a really hard effort to hold his speed over it, and I just could not match it. So this is me sort of resetting, settling in, and Cadiz coming over the top. So I'm sort of having to reset, reevaluate here, and think, okay, I guess the 2 of us are going to trade turns. Maybe we can get back to them. For now, I just need to get in the draft and try to save some watts and roll pretty fast on this descent. But I think that's the kind of interesting thing that might happen on the real course, that riding the same virtual courses over and over might not happen, or everyone would know exactly what was going on. There's something about being able to ride these real courses rendered on RGT and these other platforms that I say other platforms, really just RGT, because it's the only one with this Magic Roads feature. Super interesting to me, and especially when there's a pro race that you can pay attention to. Get back to that pro race. Leah Dixon won this stage, and she had teammate Lauren Stevens take second. Part of that has to do, the 1-2 has to do with the fact that it finishes on a climb, so those two were able to both make that front group, and then once they hit the climb, it was just kind of all out. They were able to use their team tactics to keep that group together and keep each other safe and out of harm's way, keep anything from getting away. But yeah, so these little ramps, I am not going to be caught out again, and this time this little ramp kicks up, and I see how close I am to them, and it looks like they maybe didn't kick on that one, so I'm gonna try and get this distance cut down a little bit, and hopefully Cadiz is coming with me, but if not, that is what it is. I'm realizing I'm gonna have to settle into a sort of more sustainable effort. Almost missed him because I was messing around with my towel there. Thankfully I didn't, but that's one thing on RGT. If you look away for a second, you can miss something crucial and really get caught out. So you can see those guys up the road here. They're not too far. I still have hope, but it really just depends on how hard they want to push and how hard we want to push. Thankfully, Cadiz pushed a big effort for a second there, and weird twist of fate here. So it looks like we almost tail off Melville. It looks like Paraday dropped Melville, and so now we got a 3-man working group, and I'm a little bit more hopeful now, which maybe I shouldn't be, but my thinking was the three of us, we're three of the stronger people in the race, and there's a significant amount of like false flat downhill like what we're on right now. My hope is that a bigger group will be able to really put down a little bit harder of an effort and pull it back. Generally, a bigger group rolls faster, especially on the downhills. But Paraday is up there putting down a very, very evenly paced effort. And if you watch us, we're kind of riding 3 beside each other. This is a thing in e-racing. If we had a voice chat that maybe only talk to people who are within a certain distance of you or something, so that it sort of mimics real life, you can talk to people. If you're talking, anyone who's around you can hear, and people who are in the race but half a mile back, looks like the closest guy, people who are half a mile back can't hear you. That would be super helpful, because in this scenario we could say, like, we could fall into this formation, and I mean, you can see here I'm saving significant wattage versus what Cadiz is doing at the front, and we could say, like, okay, let's take 1 minute pulls, and now Melville, you pull through, and it would be a lot easier to time these things and get the rotation smooth like you do it in real life. And I know you're not having to talk about that all the time in real life, but what you are having to do in real life is sort of signal your intent to come off the front at some point, which in real life you can do by turning, and you can't turn on any of these digital platforms. In real life, if I was taking a pull, I would take my pull and then just move to the right slightly, probably flick my elbow at the same time if I think that people are not getting it, and the next guy is going to come through and I'm going to go straight to the back, and that limits the amount of time you spend in that like sideways, like a splayed out side to side position that we were just in, and this sort of reshuffling, because the most efficient way to ride a breakaway like this, and the way that you're really going to take time back on somebody, is to be in a single file line, wheel to wheel, and then taking pulls at a specified interval, like 1 minute, 2 minute, I mean even 5 minutes, or whatever the group agrees on. But this is hurting. I'm really trying to keep my power smooth here, but also not to get caught out. Luckily for me, Cadiz is a very even pacing rider, so he's doing a really good job of driving this group. Skipping ahead here just a few K, this is the turn coming into the climb that next time. Between now and then, we really just, this group, we were all completely knackered. So, I mean, we were going fast and putting down a hard effort, but I think we all knew this climb was coming again, and we were all kind of scared of what the others might do. So you can see on the map we're not too far from Paraday, and we're not super far into the race yet, so it's not out of the question that we might get him. But I think for me personally, I don't want to break this group up any more than it is. I think that for me to try and go solo from here, if I drop these guys, I would probably end up going slower than we're going to go together, and I think that's my only chance of, getting back to that first place spot. So my plan here is to just sort of mark them and do as much as they want to do, and kind of no more, no less on this one. I'm still, hopeful that maybe we could get to him. That said, I also don't want to get caught out and let either of these guys really attack over the top of me, because they might be thinking the opposite. They might be thinking, I'm a great time trialist, I don't want to drag these guys around, I just want to go solo. So I do want to, as it gets steep here, kick up to an effort where I'm sure that these guys are not going to just completely roll me. And I think we're all thinking that, so we're all a little bit jumpy. But this is a hard climb, so those little accelerations are probably not going to be rewarded. You would have to really commit and really stick to the effort to make something happen here. So I'm just digging in. I'm not going to be too worried about these little gaps going out on the climb. I'm just going to try and manage them. 14% right here, and I'm really feeling this. You can see how hard I'm trying to push on the downstroke of the pedals. I'll talk a little bit about, I am on a kinetic rock and roll trainer, and for that type of motion I was just doing right there, I really like the rock and roll. It's not necessarily completely accurate to what it feels like to rock the bike side to side outside, but once you get used to it, I do think you can do a little bit more of that sort of move the bike to one side and put your weight on that downstroke pedal. My heart rate's hitting 180 right now, which this was the fifth race in a row. This was my fifth race in 5 days. So I think 180 is probably my maximum heart rate at this point. And luckily for me, these two don't really hit it right here, because I am on my absolute limit. You can hear how hard I'm breathing. So yeah, this deep into a training block, your heart rate's not going to get as high as maybe it would when you're totally fresh. I am definitely not fresh on this day, and I guess I'm going to blame some of my result on that lack of freshness. But I've been talking or thinking about doing this virtual Speed Week concept. Explained it in another video, but Speed Week is a series of crits here in the US, but basically the concept being sort of build your own Speed Week on some of these e-racing platforms and do races every day, different courses. Luckily, you know, Real Speed Week, you do have to travel around, so it'll be like Athens, Georgia, Roswell, Georgia, somewhere in South Carolina. It kind of travels up the eastern coast of the United States, up or down. It depends what year, what the exact schedule is. Like Spartanburg, South Carolina is another one. Luckily, on these e-racing platforms, I can travel all over, like Great Britain in this instance, or wherever, without actually having to travel. So I think I did this one on my lunch break this day. I am working from home, so that is an advantage. But yeah, I did 7 races in 7 days, just partially because there's not much else to do, and I'm just looking for a unique way to push myself. I don't exactly want to Everest. That's not really what I feel like doing right now, and I also feel like it's done to death. I mean, who knows, if this quarantine keeps going, maybe I'll do an Everest by the end of it. But the e-racing has really been motivating me, and something unique like 7 races in 7 days just was a cool goal to shoot for. Gave me something to focus on, and definitely kept me engaged all week. So I might not be completely at my peak physical power in this race, but I am definitely pushing my limits, and I hope that maybe a couple weeks down the road I'll reap some significant fitness from this big block of intensity. Yeah, checking my phone on the downhill, I think we're all pretty glad to be over that last climb. So we got one more to go, and the finish is at the top of the climb on the next lap. Finish is a little earlier than the climb, actually. You know, it's before that last kick. I was looking down right there, and that could have been fatal if these guys had really wanted to kick at that point. I'm going to try not to get caught out on these little risers this time. I was really noodling last time, and one of these was where, you know, there's these false flat downhills that have these little rises in them. Yeah, so he certainly hit it right there, and I don't have too many more of those way over threshold efforts in my legs, so I want to do that as quickly as possible and get it over with. Once again, skipping ahead a few K where we were just pushing turns. I see this ramp coming, and I go ahead and kick it up to what I thought would be enough. I did 400 watts for a second there, but these guys are just relentless. So Melville really putting in a dig right here. And this one, you know, I didn't think I was getting caught out, but I timed mine poorly. I went hard at the base and then kind of let him get a gap. So this is do or die right here. This is because that one kicks up and then right back down. And if I don't get on this downhill, and when I say on, I mean in the draft where I'm saving a significant amount of watts, that could be race over for me. Luckily, I made it back on there, but I just wanted to highlight, even sometimes when you think you're ready, I sort of mentally had made a note after getting just completely decimated a couple laps ago, you know, that there's these false flat downhills, have a little up in them, so just don't get caught out, don't get complacent. And thought I wasn't being complacent, but that still was not quite enough. A couple more K after that last attack, and the pace is kind of off here. If you're looking, it's clear that Paraday is putting down a bigger effort than we are, and I think that these guys just got tired of it, and I was not super quick on the draw right there. So these little digs are really hurting me. This is one where I should have really shut it down as soon as possible. I should have done a big effort, but at this point I'm not sure how many of those big efforts I have left in my legs, and I also know that, you know, we're coming into the climb pretty soon, so this is where, and I'll say I probably made the wrong decision here. because again, I keep surging. One thing about RGT is it is not forgiving about like once you get close enough to be drafting a little bit that you can kind of let off and you'll come back up to the wheel. You really have to get fully on the wheel before you let off the power, or what just happened to me, which is costing me another huge effort. You'll see I keep thinking I'm getting there, sitting down, I'm not getting there, so I have to stand back up again, which that's worst case scenario. You can hear me teeth gritted, huffing and puffing. It's no good. So I do get back here, but I think this might have been the final, that even though I made it back, I think that might have been the effort that finally did break me. Because here goes, and solid ride by Cadiz here. Perfectly timed counterattack right when I got back on. Didn't give me a second to rest. And maybe not totally perfect timing with that corner, but they did manage to keep it pretty fast through the corner, and I didn't. And I think this might be where I lost them. My heart rate's maxing out, and I've got to make a calculation here. Yeah, those two are together. They're both pushing 6 watts a kilo. I just don't have it. So we're down to the last 3 miles of the race, and I gotta reset my priorities, and I gotta settle back in, because I do have another ascent of the climb left, and realistically, those guys were pushing so hard. I put in a big effort and I couldn't get to them. So, and I think that's just the fatigue in the legs from all this racing. I think I probably would have had that one more match if I'd been a little fresher and also a little bit more vigilant. I should have been watching for that attack to go, and I should have covered it a little sooner. I think for every second you wait to cover an attack on RGT, you're going to spend 5 or 10 more seconds in the wind chasing. So that's true in real life too. Those split-second decisions are what really make or break your race. So right here, I'm trying to get comfortable, get reset, and reset my priorities, try and settle into something between like 250 and 300 watts up to the base of the climb, so that I can get there and not get caught. And who knows, if they start really playing games, I might come back to them. Skipping ahead a few more K of brutally painful solo riding, right around that 300 watt mark. I'm kind of letting off into this corner right here, and this is the corner into the final climb. So the gap in front of me is kind of hovered right around like 0.1 miles, and the gap behind is not coming out, but still just having to put an effort down. And I know this is my last time up the climb, so I want to empty the tank, but at the same time I don't want to blow up on this climb. And who knows, if there's a group behind me and they're really racing each other, you can get back a lot of time, a lot of distance. It's interesting, on RGT it is measured in distance rather than time, which can sort of get inflated on the downhills and contracted and expanded, I guess is the way to say it, by the hills, because the same distance going uphill and downhill can be a very different amount of seconds, and vice versa. Having said that, it's never out of the question, especially if you completely blow up on a super steep hill like this with like 14% grade. You can get caught by someone from behind who rolled into it with good speed, and also someone who has a carrot to chase. So right here, my goal is really, I'm just going to look and try and find 300 on the power meter and not go below it, which really faltering in these lower slopes, but I know that I got the steep stuff coming up, so just gonna try and stay on the power here. Looking ahead of me, looks like Melville and Cadiz are both doing 7-8 watts a kilo, which I just don't think I got another effort like that in the tank. So kudos to those guys. Super strong ride. And again, like I said, I think this time, there were 3 times every day of the race, and I think this time, both because of where it falls, especially in Europe and the UK, and it seems like most of RGT's users, especially the really strong ones, are a lot of them are British. It looked, got a strong Belgian in here, obviously too, but so things that are in a good time zone for Europe tend to be the most well attended. And then this one was also in the Facebook groups and all that. These guys had decided they were gonna keep GC points for this time. So I do think the guys that are the most serious were on this time. So kudos to them. Incredible firepower. You can see them fighting the resistance on the trainer, just absolutely grinding. I probably should have gone down a gear because I'm doing really low cadence, just dying 1,000 deaths out here. But the good news is that I'm probably not going to get overhauled from behind. It looks like I'm holding that gap pretty well, and the gap ahead is still is what it is. It doesn't look like I'm going to get up to those guys, so at this point it's just a matter of like mentally trying to stay on top of not just totally letting off the gas. It's sort of in the back of my mind though. Tomorrow is a crit stage, and while I probably can't get time back on the GC, which I'm also not really in the GC because I did the first stage in a different time zone from these guys, so I'm kind of apples and oranges when it comes to the GC. But I am already thinking maybe don't completely empty the tank, since there's nothing in it for me at this point. I need to save a little something for tomorrow, save a little something for that. I let off the power too soon and almost came to a dead stop there. Save a little something for that crit. As I'm cooling down here, you can see the stats, and you can see that profile, or I guess course profile is the wrong word, but you can see the lead in, and then you can see the circuit. And 263 watts average is probably a little low for me. I think that's me showing my fatigue a little bit. I'll throw the links up here to the other 2 stages, and I will say I expected this to be my favorite stage, but stage 3 was actually, I think, the most fun I've ever had in an e-race. Really fun stage. So watch that one if you're going to choose one or the other. But yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks.